It's addictive. Just the smell. Then you get to the taste and that's it. You're hooked.
I think there's this kind of magical thing about drinking coffee with other people.
People get together, they drink their coffee, and they talk. And it's not through a cell phone or an iPad, it's face to face.
Coffee is one of these great drinks to promote communication. It's one of those great excuses to invite somebody to talk.
A lot of people drink it because of the pick-me-up benefits that it provides. There's no doubt about that. There's something innate about drinking coffee. It just has an earthy character to it, and it's the first thing you put in your mouth in the morning. There's a certain ritual that has made it such a popular beverage for those reasons, and people look for it everywhere. The real challenge is for us to make that experience better for people. As farmers, as roasters, as retailers, we can do that, and at the same time, hopefully, make it better for the planet. So we have a lot of work to do, and now is the perfect time to really work toward that together.
Coffee is a bush. In fact, it's an understory crop from East Africa. That's where it occurs naturally.
They took this shade-loving shrub and stuck it in a tropical forest, and it prospered. So coffee grows at high altitude in a belt around the equator in the tropics.
The whole world knows the birthplace of coffee is Ethiopia.
Well, coffee is big in Ethiopia. If you drive around or walk around, even any downtown area, any city, you see Ethiopian coffee ceremony happening, and people actually love coffee.
Coffee, you are not going to plant it in the city. Coffee is really in the remote area, very dark from the city. You drive and drive and drive. By the end of the day, when you get there, it might be rain, muddy, slippery, so that's not easy. You should like that job. If you don't like, if it is muddy, oh, I don't like this muddy, I'm gonna go back home. No, you go fight against the muddy. So you need to have a four-wheel drive car. Sometimes the car get breakdown, you see. And then when the car break down, and then people start pushing the car, and then together, all together, you go on the top of the mountain where the coffee is. So it's not easy. This is enough. My name is Akmal Nouri. I'm a coffee farmer in Limukosa. My farm is 200 hectares altogether. The altitude is from 1,600 to 2,135 in between. When our country became to the communist, the Derg regime nationalized my father's coffee. And then I left the country. So after I graduated in Yugoslavia, I went to America. I was working a lot of works there and then saving money because I have a dream. I have a goal. It was inside of me, to have my own coffee farm. I started from scratch. It was not easy, but I make it. I did it. I'm very happy. Now I have 200 hectares of coffee. That was my dream. The dream comes true. And then this time when I see my farm, that gives me really inside of satisfaction. It is my therapy, especially when I see the forest, because I am really a nature person. I like nature. Here we go. We are in the middle of the jungle. I feel so inside full, when I come here. Free therapy. My coffee is not only just a regular coffee, it is a forest coffee. It is really deep forest. You can say this is a coffee from the forest. Coffee loves to live with the trees. Coffee needs a shade. Nature makes coffee beautiful.
Shade-grown coffee is coffee that has tall trees over it that provide shade, and the shade is like a forest. It can also provide pretty good habitat for wildlife in general. Now, it can't replace natural forest. We should never say that. But for agricultural land use that is economically productive and gives something to farmers for doing what they do, and also has this dimension of environmental benefits, that's a pretty good system. There's not a lot of cultivated crops and plants that can make that claim.
Coffee is a forest plant. So if you're a forest plant, you grow in shade. You may not be able to plant as densely in shade, but you plant far more closely to its natural habitat. And so that's what you're trying to replicate. You're trying to get a moderated shade, not no sun, but you're trying to get that dappled so that the sun comes through, but there is shade, there is cool, there is moisture. Moisture is very important. The shade's part of the moisture. I'm Dorian Rowan Campbell, and my farm is Rowan's Royale. The Blue Mountains are exquisite. It's a real privilege to have a farm there. They're beautiful, and the flavor of our Blue Mountain coffee is exceptional. It's 8 acres. A great deal of the farm is just in forest because it's just too steep to cultivate anything on. It would not be ecologically sound to plant on it. So we have about 3 acres where we can plant coffee. And I've probably got 1.5 acres where the coffee is planted. It's not planted as closely as might be recommended, but it is an organic farm. It has to be sustainable. So there's a lot of other life that has to go on the farm apart from the coffee.
Yes, a lot of birds.
Yeah, a lot of birds. Yeah. Every time we clear it, I see a lot of birds.
Old man witch and woodpecker, hunty-katy, goldfinch, and you name it.
And blowy, and them they're the most.
What the big one here? What the big bird in here?
Mountain witch. We have mountain witch, we have white belly. We have the big bird, them the name again.
But they make so nice sound, the bird watcher them sometimes you see them all on the road and gather the sound, maybe to put in a movie or something, I don't know.
My dad bought this farm when I was about 12. And so a lot of the big trees there have been friends for many, many years. He always did have a fair amount of trees, but not the amount of shade that I really want to have. My dad stopped cultivating in about 77, and I didn't start on the farm until 92. So it meant that I had a fresh slate. I could start doing what I needed to do, and I could learn doing it without making too many disastrous mistakes. And so I began to teach myself about organic. And it was teach yourself, because at that time, if you tried to go online, it was very, very expensive. Then I began to realize that part of going organic was making certain that you had the right mix of shade trees, flowering trees, shrubs, grasses. And so I began my quest for shade coffee.
You can grow coffee in 2 ways. You can grow it as sun coffee or you can grow it as shade coffee. Sun coffee is highly productive. You actually get more beans per hectare than you do with shade coffee. But there's a price to pay for that.
On the one hand, you can have higher yields, a lot of coffee coming out of the land, but you then have some other issues you have to deal with. Soil erosion, perhaps water contamination, workers being exposed to agrochemicals, pesticides. So there's some trade-offs there. If all farms were to go conventional, sun-grown, well, we'd have a lot of coffee in the world, and we'd probably also have some very long-term consequences to deal with because of the way the land is treated.
Well, because that's really not how coffee wants to grow. They're beautifully planted out very close together, and it's very hard to find a tree that's anywhere near it. Yes, and you'll get a lot of bearing, but it's not sustainable. You're going to have to keep putting more and more inputs, usually of a chemical kind, into it to get it to keep producing, because there's nothing regenerative about it. I think shade coffee is far more regenerative. It allows the plant to rest more because the shade is doing part of the work.
I'm Jefferson Shriver. I'm the owner of Gaia Estate here in Nicaragua. This farm has about 115 years of coffee history. And so if you looked around the farm, it's mostly rustic shade. This is the way coffee was originally grown. So basically they just took out the understory of a forest, cleared the understory, kept the forest, and started growing coffee here. One of the first things we're really proud about with this farm is the fact that it has trees that are anywhere from 50 years to some say 200, 250 years old. When you walk the farm, you just get a sense that there are all kinds of living organisms and animals and trees and crops that are feeding off one of the other. So there's a lot of misconceptions about what shade-grown coffee is and what it isn't. Shade-grown coffee isn't just coffee that's grown perhaps underneath a banana plant. It really needs to look a lot like a forest looks like. We have fruit trees first as that first story. We have fast-growing forest trees that are a part of that second story. Those might also be taller fruit trees. And then we have these larger third story, that last story of the shade system. Those are usually our oldest, and that combination of shade is just great for the whole system. Now you have to manage that shade because sun does have to come through the branches and photosynthesis has to interact with the plant. You can see the leaf structure there. The leaf structure is thin and allows a lot of sun to come in. And because they're so kind of thin in that sense, they easily mulch back into the soil. I've always been interested in this relationship between forests and how we can sustain forests as humans, but at the same time, how agriculture can mingle with that and humans can make a living from an agroforestry system. Coffee really is a great crop for the mixing of those two worlds because it's a shade-tolerant crop.
You choose, at least what we do is choose the most beautiful, big and red and healthy cherry, and that will eventually become a seed that we will plant in a nursery. This turns into a tree. There are certain different methods of how to do it, but you dry it, you wash it, then you put it in a bag and it starts growing for about 10 months. 11 months, and then you transport each bag, one tree, to the farm, and then manually you open a hole in the ground, you put some fertilizer, a little conditioner to the ground, and then you plant it. Then it's a year-long process. It's a non-stop process. You have to clear the small plant from weeds. You have to fertilize it, you have to take care of the shade. You have to also take care of him when the plant gets sick. You need to give him medicine, vitamins, so he grows healthy and strong. Yeah, no active spores. No, it's okay. My name is Giancarlo Hanke, and I'm a coffee farmer. I manage 5 different fincas, and I've dedicated my life to farming coffee. I've been doing it for about 10 years. I spend 100% of my time doing it. That's what I do for a living, and I love it. My family has been growing coffee for more than 100 years, so I was always around coffee since I was a little kid. So I like to think that I chose coffee, but I'm not sure if coffee chose me. After I finished college, I took the decision to do this for a living and get really involved in the producing and processing and selling coffee. Nice. I'm here every day, and every day I'm amazed of how it's growing, healthy and green, and it's looking very good. You can tell that he will have a lot of coffee actually next year. All these you see will be the future flowers. And after the flowering, they will become coffee cherries. It's what we have been doing for decades, and I really wish my kids will love coffee as much as I do. So it's a lifestyle for me. It's my way of living. What I do for fun, it's basically everything, you know. I could not imagine being at another place. I love being around green. I love being in the mountains, hearing birds, hearing animals, hearing the wind in the trees, instead of hearing like cars or machines or people around me. I think it's a very healthy way of living, you know, being productive and enjoying yourself and enjoying nature and make a living out of it. So it's a blessing.
So coffee is a shrub that takes 3 years to get its first crop. So you have to plant a seedling that can come from your own seed, no problem. And it grows up to, usually about 2 meters. Then you want to be pruning it, so you don't want it to get too high. And after 3 years, you get your first harvest. And if you are fertilizing it well, you're pruning it well, you're getting good weeding around it, the coffee can be quite productive. You have to have a reasonable amount of rainfall and some good humidity in the soil. It's always helpful to have cool nighttime temperatures as well. So most coffee is grown above, say, 600 meters, 500 to 600 meters, and ideally, it's say 1,000 to 1,500 meters. And that is how coffee is grown for the most part, yeah. That same coffee shrub can last anywhere from 15 up to 30 years if you're doing regular pruning.
What takes place during the growing season is a lot of cleaning, feeding, looking after it. The trees, definitely it's a year-round effort. The cherries, when they emerge from the tree, they come out in the color green, and then they start to turn ripe in September, October, November. We measure the sugar content, the bricks of sugar, and it's kind of like a wine grower does. We pick the cherries when they're deep red. It's a quality issue, okay? So you can correlate how good the coffee is going to be by how good your pick is. I'm one of the 2 owners of Finca Dos Jefes in Boquete, Chiriquí, Republic of Panama. We're a small farm, 2.7 hectares. I came to Panama in 2002 to visit Panamanian friends. I'm from San Francisco in the United States. We fell in love with the graciousness of the Panamanian people. We came back a few months after our first visit, and we're looking for a piece of land to build a small home on. At the end of 2 days of looking, they asked us if we'd like to see an abandoned coffee farm. I said, sure, why not? And they drove us up a hill. We saw the property on a Thursday night, purchased it the next morning, and then had to figure out how to become coffee farmers. Okay. What I will tell you is that when the coffee bug bit me, it took over my entire life. Harvests generally take about 4 months on a farm. Everything doesn't turn red at the same time, and that's why it's so labor intensive. You'll work an area of the farm, take everything deep red in color off of it, move picking someplace else, and then return. Each tree picked between 8 and 10 times during the 4-month period, and everything's picked individually in a pinching, twisting motion so you can leave the stem on for the following year's growth. About 20 weeks after the picking, a small white flower comes out. It's a very magical time to be on a coffee farm. You go to bed at night and everything is green, the first flowering of the year, and you wake up, it looks like it snowed. Maybe 20,000 little white flowers on the farm. The aromas are intoxicating, lavender, licorice, jasmine rolled into one, and it permeates the area. It's really, really spectacular. The flowers don't stay on very long though. They fall off in 3 or 4 days. They leave a small bud, and then the bud takes 9 months to turn into a full-size green cherry, and then we start that cycle again.
What we do here is we hand-pick them, put them in a basket, which is tied to your waist. So the pickers have their 2 hands free and are able to hold themselves in the terrain, which is uneven or it's wet, so it's slippery.
One of the things that we make sure that we do is to pick those cherries when they're at their ripest moment. They can just be pulled off the branch of the plant effortlessly. And pickers know exactly how to do that. And one of the ways that we incentivize that is to pay workers a better price for the coffee that they're picking of the highest quality. So we will do that, and pickers are really proud to be working with us because they get a better wage for what they're picking, and they know they're picking the highest quality coffee. So they really take pride in that. Most of the pickers are women at this point in time, and we know them very well. We know their families, we have a relationship with them, and we really take care of that picking process.
18, 19, 20, 21, 22.
22.
Sí. That's just to know how many beans in each of these up here. Will be about 100 beans in here.
Sí.
Once the coffee is ripe, you pick only the red cherries, and those red cherries are hauled to a processing station. You have a lot of options of how to process the coffee. You can do a fully washed coffee, semi-washed coffee, natural, honeys. You can dry them in the patios. You can dry them in raised beds. You can dry them in a machine. So it's what your consumer or your buyer wants.
At the end of the day, you take your bag to the wet mill, and what we do is a separation process with water. The heavier beans go to the bottom of the container, and the floaters are classified because they're lighter. We depulp the coffee, ferment the coffee, wash the coffee, and then after we wash it, we send it to the patio to dry the coffee. And after 3-4 days, the coffee is then ready to sit in parchment in the warehouse.
You need to have a lot of patience, and you have to have a high amount of knowledge because the process can go wrong at any given time. And so if you are harvesting the beans when they're not quite red enough, if you're fermenting the beans and you don't ferment long enough, or you ferment too long, if you are taking off, removing the mucilage and you don't really get all that mucilage off, if you're drying and you don't get the right humidity, the quality of the cup can be completely changed. When people drink their cup of coffee, they don't realize all that's going on beforehand, and it's an incredible process.
The alternative to the wash method is the natural method, okay? It's what's done in a lot of the African countries, and it's what's being done out here. It's taking the cherries, keeping them intact, and putting them onto a raised drying bed.
On this farm, the very first thing that we do when we pick the cherries is we float them in a wheelbarrow full of water, okay? 98, 99% will drop directly to the bottom in a normal year. So we have 1 to 2% floating. Those that float, we know will never be good coffee. They don't have the right nutrient material. We skim them and compost them. The other 98% go onto the drying beds, and they sit in the sun on this farm for 20 to 25 days of good sunshine. Good sunshine is the operative word in that statement, okay? Every evening, or whenever it threatens to rain, they need to be covered. It's labor intensive. 2 guys, maybe 3 hours every evening during our 4-month drying period. At that point, we allow the coffee to rest for a minimum of 90 days. During that resting period, the properties of the coffee settle down and the coffee becomes better, okay?
First station, take off the screen, and then the dirt, the dark one, the small size, and then the broken one, we will take it away. And then also the color sort. Color sort is taking off the green one, unmatured coffee, and then some unusual color, so we will take it off. Finally, if something passes from machine, the last destination is the human being. The ladies are picking something which machine did not get it. Coffee is very easy sweet when you drink it. It's not easy preparing. From A to Z, when you come from down to here, long process. Okay, now we are talking about coffee, farm, and then the agricultural technique, everything. You see, this is all about coffee. You see here, it's all coffee, ready to export.
Something that's always important when we are looking to buy new coffee is the sweetness and the clean cup. That is what shows us if the coffee farmer or cooperative have been doing a good job in what they do. You can't really have a sweet and clean cup unless you have ripe cherries, and everything throughout the whole way from them to us has been good. My name is Kasper Engel Rasmussen. I am a roaster in charge of the quality of roast at Coffee Collective. Where I'm in charge of buying is in Ethiopia. And here we work with 2 different companies. One is Ahmed Nouri, and then we work with a company called Metat. The way we taste the coffees is that we set up a cupping. It's kind of like a standard way of tasting coffee in the coffee industry. With Metat, we can go, they have like a professional setup, and it's just an amazing place to go and taste coffees. I mean, they're so good at roasting it. Everything is set up exactly how you want it, so it's a very precise way to taste the coffees.
So when they cup, they use our laboratory. They evaluate the raw coffee, what it looks like, it smells like, and all that. But actually, cup them. We always call them so they don't know which is which. So we get an honest response, feedback of their cupping. So that's how they select. The more we cup with them, the more we know what kind of coffee profile they're looking for.
A cupping is set up quite simple. It's like you add a certain amount of coffee, boiling water, just under boiling. Let it sit for 4 minutes, then you stir it. Make sure to stir everything, so everything that's extracted is blended. And then you just let it sit, skim the creamer that's on top, and then you just slurp it with a spoon. And it's a horrible sound. So you have both flavor and aroma at once. Flavor is what you have on the tongue, so that is the sweetness and acidity, whereas the aromas is the stuff that you get through the nose. That's where you can catch some florals. So it has almost green strawberry for me, like not fully developed, but also like black currant, and just, yeah, super intense. It's very elegant and citrus and bergamot, very clean, lacks maybe a bit of sweetness. I have peach again, and some honey and melon in the aromas. I scored in 91. It's just very, very complex coffee. There's a lot of layers. You can keep tasting it and tasting something different each time. It's amazing. Yeah, we were going back and forth. This one has more acidity, but this one is just so sweet and just clean and just beautiful. Elegant. Yeah.
This is natural Hambella Buku.
Okay.
Last washed Hambella Bentinenga.
This one? The first one?
070.
Yeah. 2014 was the first year we bought Ahmel's coffee. Yeah, and Ahmel was just such a likable fella. It's just like the way he talks about his farm and also the nature and how wild it is there. For him, it's about growing it as natural as possible. It's like anything. I mean, I've never seen any farm like that before. I'd been down south and met some guys there. They're so professional and everything is so well organized, and I was like, wow, this is cool. Ahmel could maybe learn something from this. We agreed to do a little road trip. We drove down to Yekaterinburg and to Gucci and visited some cooperatives and some farms there for him to see how they do it. It's not to tell him this is how you should do it, but just talk to them, get some inspiration, meet others that work in the same field. He got to talk to one of the agronomists there, and they got along really well. So it was very much them going together out in the forest, talking about different techniques. It's amazing to see how we can work together on doing something better.
This will grow fast,
yeah, exactly.
And then use it for 5 or 6 years, and then the other one will replace it.
Yeah, okay. Then the other one will grow
the permanent one,
taller, and then it will give the shade. The coffee bean is just a seed inside a cherry. So when you take it out, it's green and it's almost hard as a stone. Sometime in history, people figured out that if you roast this, you can actually create some aromas. We just turned something that tastes like grass into something that tastes like coffee. When we receive the samples of the coffees, we have to make a decision what we want to do with it. We have this test roaster, so we test everything. So we kind of already know when we receive the coffees, what do we want to achieve with this coffee? Is it to be used for espresso? Is it to be used for filter? And then it's just, all based on experience. So what do you want to create a coffee? Do you want it to be like super wild and aromatic? Does it have that by nature? Then that's what we want to highlight. If it's just a very balanced, smooth, sweet coffee, then we want to highlight that and then we roast to another degree.
You have to know what you're roasting. Every variety, every coffee has its own roasting profile. It's not the same to roast Pacas grown at 700 meters than Bourbon at 1,700 meters. It's a totally different thing. So a roaster can either make the coffee better or it can make the coffee worse. And every variety behaves different inside the barrel, you know. You have to know exactly how much time, the temperature, how much time after the first crack and all that, so it's another world.
You have to adjust the profile as the green coffee comes in, because every bag of coffee is different. This is hand-picked, hand-processed coffees. So I think it's really important to roast it properly. Roasting is a science. It's where the flavor comes from. It's where you bring out the best of the coffee. It's where, you know, if you start with good coffee or great coffee, the way you roast it can enhance it or ruin it. It's a really skilled artisan process, and takes a long time to learn to do it right.
To be a good coffee roaster, I think you need to be very focused. You need to be able to do the exact same thing each time. So you only change one parameter at a time, because then you can actually test the coffees. That is one thing. And then be good at tasting coffee. Taste everything you do. So what we always do is, when we are to learn anything about a coffee, we do 2 almost identical roasts. We make one slight change, and then it's A/B cupping. So it's like everything we do, we taste it, and from that we learn every single day. On the cupping table, it's more about the nuance of the specific roast. What is it that makes this one better than the other? What did we do different? It's just a long process of trial and error. We have all these different graphs that we can look at. When we combine that with we taste everything, all of a sudden we have this big puzzle where we can go in and actually see what creates more sweetness, what creates more acidity. So we can use this as a tool to learn more about roasting coffee. Every roast degree is a preference. So if something is dark roast for me, maybe that's a light roast for others. So instead of talking about light or dark, I'd rather just say that we roast to the degree we feel is the best to suit the coffee and the brewing method. In general, we roast for filter or espresso. Filter coffee creates a very clean, aromatic experience where it's very much focused on the terroir of the coffee. If you brew a French press or an AeroPress, that's actually a different brew method. The water and the coffee is soaking together, whereas in a filter, the water just passes through the coffee. So even though you kind of end up with something almost similar, it's actually 2 different brew methods. Then you have espresso, where it's more focused on the sweetness, and it's another sensation where it's more intense aroma, and it's like a small thing, but it lingers for longer. I think there's some essentials when you are to brew a good cup of coffee. Water is where we kind of extract the flavors. So good water and a good grinder, that is the most basic thing. If you have that, you can brew amazing coffee on any coffee brewer.
For coffee to be sustainable It has to be sustainable for everyone. The roaster, the buyer, the farmer, the farm worker, for all the people involved in the supply chain.
Coffee workers are very low paid. Here in Panama, we have a very strong economy. We have the strongest economy in Central America. We have an agricultural minimum wage for a coffee worker of $11.30 a day.
We pay our workers substantially more than that. You can't live on $11.30 a day, and you can't have any kind of quality of life. You can't support a family. You can't have proper nutrition or pay for any of the things that most of us assume come with quality of life.
To make it worse, most of the farms are paying their employees between $7 and $8 a day. They're not even making the minimum wage. In parts of the rest of the world, salaries much, much lower. And my contention in the whole thing here is that it doesn't need to be this way. Okay? Enormous amounts of money are being made at the point of consumption, and very little of that is coming back down to origin. And I think it's a broken industry, an industry in need of major, major correction. When you're a coffee grower, there are two ways to be in business. Okay? You can be a quality seller, which means you're probably going to be exporting the coffee, or a quantity seller. Much, much more profitable to be a quality seller, but much more difficult also. When you're a farm owner, you incur your major expenses in the months during the harvest. So December, January, February, maybe even into March. Nearly 60% of the cost of growing coffee is involved in paying the pickers to pick the cherries. But then when you send the coffee out for export, you won't receive your money until maybe November, or if you're lucky, December. So you're talking about a 10 or 12-month period of cash flow strain. I'm very, very lucky. I mean, I know how lucky I am. I can withstand that. But most of the people, it's very much of a hand-to-mouth industry. You pick the cherries, you sell them so that you can put food on the table.
Everything is changing from year to year. The market price has been down to around $1 a pound. You can't even produce coffee at that cost. We want to create coffee experiences that excites us, but also where we get to pay better prices to farmers. The way we do it is always based on the quality. So we don't want to do any charity. It's not about that. It's about buying from people that do amazing work. And we know if we want the best quality, we need to invest in the coffee. So we need to pay a price that's fair for the product. It's easy to say we pay well, but is that to an importer? Is it directly to the farm? I'd rather be talking about the traceability. How transparent are companies really willing to be? I think that's the way we're heading. We do trade as direct as possible. Sometimes it's with the farm, sometimes it's with a cooperative. It's been about making sure we do certain things. We pay minimum above the market price. We visit the producers, so we build on the relationship.
Well, first banana done coffee here.
Yeah. We work with people in some pretty poor areas. So it's all about enhancing living conditions first and foremost.
Banana.
Yeah, okay. So they use it for shade.
Yeah, they are using it for shade. Yeah. Food and coffee together grow.
Yes.
All right, that's great. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Intercropping. Yeah.
Better housings, better food, better education. And then of course some invest in better equipment. How can they produce even better quality so they can get even higher prices?
Yeah, and it takes away the floaters here.
It's a beautiful thing to be a part of.
It's a bigger washing station compared to Umbrella, this one. This one? Yeah.
We work with many different countries now. In some countries we work with cooperatives, some other we work with small private farms, and some we work with bigger private farms. Ahmed has his own farm. I try to go twice a year, and we've been working many years to get the quality up. The big lot we buy, we pay $3.70 per pound direct to Ahmed. For the special things that we work on, we pay everything from $4.50 up to $7 per pound.
It's fair for me, it is good for them. Getting this price means you are going to have enough money to financially support your employee and then to make better your farm. When you work, you are not working for yourself only. You work for the country, you work for your family, you work for the community. Really, it's good, makes you happy inside of you. I support community school. Sometimes I go to give them a lecture because education is powerful. By being educated, and you can have a lot of opportunities. So please come to school and then be a good student. And then I help school always every year financially, build classes, and then buy equipment, sport equipment. I bought last year a computer for the school. It means a lot for them because kids, they never saw the computer at the school. It's a very remote area.
Okay. Thank you very much.
This year, they gave me an award. The award is what I did for the community for the last few years. And then they're really very thankful. They said really they appreciate what I did for the school. And then I said, no problem, we work together, and then whatever I can, I will help the school.
Everybody's talking about sustainable this, sustainable that. You even hear politicians talk about something being sustainable or not sustainable. But from its initial use from environmentalists and ecologists, it first just has meant one of sort of ecological sustainability, something that can, be in place for an indefinite amount of time and be sustained kind of year after year after year. But I think also that it's more than that. It has to be socially sustainable, right? People have to be involved with it and have to be able to exist with it and gain from it year after year. And it has to be economically, of course. I think a lot of companies, when they talk about sustainability, they're only talking about the economic sustainability of whatever it is they're addressing. But I think you have those three where you have environmental, social, and economic sustainability, and that then means it can be in place for a very long time and continue to exist in whatever form it has.
If we valued the ecosystem services that were produced on shade coffee farms, and that's not just saving the birds, it's protecting the watershed, it's creating lumber, it's sequestering carbon, it's saving pollinators. We need to do all of those things, none of which is happening in sun coffee. Then the economics would be very obvious. The trouble is, we don't value those things. We value them, but we're not willing to pay for them. If there was actually monetary values associated with that, this would be a no-brainer. Everybody would be doing shade coffee.
So shade is really important for coffee for a number of reasons. So for one reason, we have a situation of climate change now that is creating warming conditions around the world, obviously, and also locally. And so shade is really good to create a microclimate. So that really helps us. Shade also really helps to generate nutrient recycling. So the trees will drop leaves that will mulch into the soil and provide a certain level of fertilization and nutrients to the coffee plants themselves. That's all really good for the coffee. Coffee doesn't need tons of rain, but it does need a good level of humidity that stays in the soil. The trees defoliate at the end of the harvest season, just as the dry season's beginning. And that's an incredible thing because basically this blanket of leaves then covers the soil when the soil needs it most. All around, shade is just a great companion to coffee. Here at Gaia, we have over 70 species of trees. It is really a lot like a forest in that sense. If you walk around this farm, you're going to see tons of butterflies. You're going to see tons of insects. We're really proud of the sanctuary that it provides for birds and all kinds of wildlife. You know, we have iguana, we have armadillo, we have rabbits, we have deer. We have all kinds of wildlife here, and it's just really great to see this haven for wildlife on a farm.
I love really nature, and then I love wild animals also. There's a sign, don't cut the trees, and then no shot. Don't kill animals. I don't want animals to go away. I don't want forest to go away. I want coffee with the forest to be alive together and then animals to be together there. So in the middle of my coffee land, I left about 21 hectares untouched forest. You cannot walk inside because it's deep forest. Sometimes when you see animals, they run away. You know where they are going to run away? In that deep forest. So which means they have a place where to stay. Yeah, you cannot follow them, you cannot get them. It is just, hey, I'm at home, goodbye. Well, coffee is just for monkeys. It belongs for nature. We didn't plant it, so it's not ours. We have a lot of very interesting animals there. Monkeys, and then wild pigs, and hyena, a lion, and then deer, a lot of birds.
Well, the birds that make use of coffee farms, they're not there necessarily for the coffee. They're there for the shade trees that are protecting the coffee. The birds will come to a shade coffee farm, especially if there is a diversity of shade trees. You know, there are flowers that are providing nectar for certain birds. There are plants that are attracting insects for other birds that make use of insects. There are places for birds to hang out because they feel safe, because it's dense vegetation. There are lots of trunks and limbs that certain birds like to run around on, and you know, birds do different things depending on what species they are. So all of that structural diversity then provides what ecologists call different niches for birds to make a living. And so the more niches you have, the more bird species you can support.
"42 out of our 54 species of warblers in North America come down to coffee farms. That's by far most of them. Are orioles, swallows, vireos, buntings, what else? Flycatchers. They're all coming south, and many of those are attempting to spend the winter in what is now coffee farms. They're coming to where they always came, but if it's recently been converted to a coffee farm, that's what they have. In the past, people thought that the Shade trees will support wildlife simply because they're trees and they're providing shade. Nobody was thinking very much about the food that they provide. People don't like insects. They don't realize, though, that they're the primary component of terrestrial food webs. It's the insect that is eating the plant and then transferring the energy to birds and reptiles and mammals and all kinds of other things. So if we lost our insects, we would lose most of the biological diversity on this planet. But you don't have the insects if you don't have the right plants that support them. So the more trees we have in those coffee farms, the better, but the more productive those trees are, the better for the birds. Birds are ecological indicators that tell us how our ecosystems are doing. We have 50% fewer songbirds today than we had just 40 years ago. So that tells us there's something very wrong with the ecosystem supporting those birds. And those are the same ecosystems supporting us. And we don't want to wait till those systems collapse to try to do something about it. We've got to do it proactively.
Well, there used to be an ad which said if you wink at a pretty girl in the dark, no one knows that you're doing it. You need to advertise. So I guess it's kind of like that. If you are doing all this work, you need something which says, I am doing it, and I can tell people that I am doing it. And I've been certified now since 2002. Everything that we produce is organic. And I'm not saying that everybody has to go organic, but they need to go sustainable. And conventional production is not sustainable. I don't think that you can feel that you have custody over a piece of land that you can abuse. And to me, putting in massive pesticides and fertilizers which break down the soil is a form of abuse. So I had to find a way of working with the soil, with the farm, with the plants that were there. And the process was organic. What the certification does is to make sure that people know that you are doing what you say you're doing.
We need to remember that third parties need to exist to ensure the consumer that what the label says they're getting is what they're getting. So consumers cannot just trust a company and their social mission based on what they say that they are offering. Because companies can offer all kinds of marketing approaches, but you're just trusting their word. And while there are companies with many good intentions, it's a third-party certification that comes in and really looks at a number of criteria and says, okay, you're meeting the criteria or you're not.
Bird-friendly coffee refers to coffee that is certified as being good for birds. Now, the first criterion for us is that the coffee needs to be certified organic, just because there's way too much scientific literature on the impact of agrochemicals on wildlife. If a farm is certified organic and then the management of the shade meets some criteria we created, then it can be bird friendly. Now, the criteria that we created came directly out of field research done by colleagues that I have at the Migratory Bird Center, where it was determined that the height of the trees is an important factor. The species diversity of the trees that are providing shade is an important factor. The overall foliage cover that is being provided is an important variable as well. And the structure is also important.
Well, sun-grown coffee does not have canopy trees. It's fully exposed to the sun. So if there are no trees, there's no place for birds to forage. And then you're certainly not producing the insects they want to forage on. So it's a very harsh environment for birds. Coffee is grown in the most biologically diverse regions of the world, so this is a perfect opportunity. It's really a profound conservation opportunity to use shade trees properly. We have the option of growing the coffee and saving it for something else at the same time. So we're not talking about giving up the agriculture. This is just one of the unique opportunities to do both at the same time.
It was amazing to see how after 2 years of being bird-friendly and organic, we start seeing so many birds and the new life in the farm. I love birds, I love trees, I love everything, but I have to prove that it's true. That's the reason why there is a need to have the certifications. The certification is needed so the consumer knows that I'm not selling something that is not true.
So what bird-friendly coffee is it's coffee that you know comes from a place that's good for migratory birds. It's good for local biodiversity. It's good for family farmers and their children and their workers, and it's good for the earth we all share. And it's also great tasting coffee.
Bird-friendly, I think, is the gold standard of environmental coffee. It is the gold standard in the sense that it is rewarding farmers for doing the right thing. There's no use of agrochemicals, no pesticides, no herbicides. And that has a positive effect on birds and has a positive effect on all the biodiversity on the farm and the workers. I don't want to get too rigid and to say that the only approach to sustainable production is organic and shade grown. At the same time, I do think it's the gold standard. We have 132 species of birds that we've observed on the farm. That's a sign that the ecosystem is healthy and that we're doing something right to nurture that ecosystem. We're not damaging it. The whole idea is that we can help to enhance the health of the ecosystem and make a livelihood.
We need to plant for the future and grow for the future. So that's what sustainability is. It's looking down that road and saying, if I do this, this soil is going to be healthy. These trees are going to be healthy. We're going to be able to keep producing on this land.
I think consumers should get more involved in the process, and not only consume, but understand what they're putting inside their bodies, what they're buying, knowing where the product comes from, how it was produced, all the people that are involved in the process. I think people should ask that to the stores or wherever they get the coffee.
You should ask about what's happening on the farm where this coffee is being grown. What are the soil conditions? What are the shade conditions? What are the workers' conditions? You can demand a higher quality product with your dollars. You're spending a lot of money for it. I mean, you really are. The idea that you can spend $5, €5 for a cup of coffee, and the guy who grows it is making $5 all day. We can do better as an industry. There'll always be coffee. Okay, there will always be coffee. The question is whether there will always be wonderful specialty coffee. I think there will be. But who's going to produce it? How's it going to be produced? Will it be ethically produced? That's the big question.
There have to be market incentives for sustainable production of coffee. And until that happens, then farmers will be responding to signals that will enable them to make a living. And we just have to get those market signals right. I think with responsible consumers, educated consumers, consumers that really care about the environment and know more about things like organic and bird-friendly coffee, can really begin to make a difference.
If the people who buy and drink coffee want coffee to be produced in a sustainable way, it will be. If they don't, it won't be. That's it. I believe in the market system that way. So it's up to the end user to say, no, we want fair trade coffee. No, we want organic coffee. No, we want bird-friendly coffee. And if they vote with their pocketbooks, there'll be some movement. You can do a lot of good just by drinking coffee. It's a great way to feel good. It's a great way to start the day.
Buy that shade coffee is one, but think about your daily life and how what you do impacts the things around you. Very simple changes often can make a huge difference. We've had this idea that humans are here and nature is someplace else. And that worked for a long time because there weren't very many humans and there was a lot of nature. Now there's a lot of humans and very little nature, not enough nature to support all those humans. So we now have to have nature again in our yards, where we farm, in our cities, where we play. We have to share all of our spaces with other species. And that's fun. We're not talking about a sacrifice here.
To the degree possible, more consumers need to look at the value of shade-grown coffee, look for it, prioritize it, buy it wherever they can. It might cost just a tad bit more, but it really is worth it for the farmers, for the landscape, for the planet.